My name is Richard McIver and I'm the CEO of Cash Converters Southern Africa, the franchisor operation for Cash Converters in Southern Africa. I got into business 27 years ago with my partner Peter Forshaw, but the story really started a lot earlier than that.
I'm Peter Forshaw, the CFO of Cash Converters Southern Africa. Richard and I met in 1981 while doing military service. And then we continued our friendship when we studied at UCT from 1983, and we were involved in a number of committees and social groupings. But at the same time we worked together. We were involved in RAG and we were involved in InterVarsity, and we created a great working relationship. Post-university, I came to Johannesburg. Richard worked in the corporate world, and I went my way into auditing, and we just kept in touch as friends. But Richard always said to me, if I ever came across something that could be interesting, I must give him a call.
Every now and again he'd phone up and say, wouldn't you like to buy a jacket making factory or a transport company, or this business has come across my desk. Until one day he phoned up and said, don't you want to become a pawnbroker? I said, yes, Pete, everybody aspires to becoming a pawnbroker. And that was the start of the journey, actually. He'd come across Cash Converters effectively from an ex-partner of ours in the UK.
I got introduced to the concept of franchising back in 1983, and franchising just really absorbed my imagination, and we started looking at some international franchise concepts, and we came across Cash Converters. One of the key concepts in terms of starting a franchise business is you need an individual. You need someone who's going to be the brand, Mr. Cash Converters. And I gave Richard a call and said, Richard, what do you think about pawnbroking and second hand? And he said, no, he thinks it could be quite interesting. And the rest is really history.
I remember going to watch a video that Cash Converters Australia put together explaining the business model, and looked at this and I thought, this makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. We were coming out of the old South Africa, things were looking really good. We expected that the new South Africa would generate a consumer-driven society that Cash Converters would plug into really well. After we had discussed the opportunity of Cash Converters, I figured that if I was going to get involved, I needed to actually see Cash Converters in 3D, so to speak. So myself and an ex-partner of ours got on a plane. We flew down to Perth in Western Australia. And we effectively spent a weekend in Cash Converters stores. Long story short, decided we'd go ahead with it.
At the same time, I was involved with Postnet. We brought 2 international master franchises into the country at the same time. And we need to go back to 1993, 1994. We were just coming out of the previous regime, and it was the new South African. And I had a strong belief that franchising was a fantastic business concept that could be used to empower people, particularly in a South African context. We'd been incredibly isolated. There were very, very few international brands operating in South Africa, primarily in the fast food industry, and a couple of South African homegrown brands. We took the decision at that time to look at bringing in international master licenses, as opposed to copying and starting from scratch.
I focused on the Cash Converter business. We had a broader group of investors, and we built both of those businesses in parallel. I was always identified as the guy that was going to operationalize this business, so it was really my role to open the first store. We thought it would be a good idea that I operated the first store, so that if I was going to be running the business, I knew exactly what I was talking about. The only one of us that really had any skills in retailing was living in Cape Town, so we thought it would be a good idea if I relocated to Cape Town. He would help me in the front end of the whole process in establishing the first store. We started looking for premises. We finally came across a guy in Cape Town who was prepared to take a risk with us, and we opened the first store in Parow in September, October of 1994. And I ran that store effectively for a couple of years before we on-sold it, and then started developing the franchise model in the Cape. And then I moved to Johannesburg in 1998 to start basing the head office of Cash Converters from Gauteng. Through our journey, we've also owned the Multiserve franchise. We bought that in the early 2000s, effectively out of liquidation, and plus minus 10 years later on-sold it after we re-established that business. We've also got involved in the first social franchise in the country called Sport for All, basically putting kids in the township into sports. Early 2000s, when we sold the PostNet business and listed that, and Peter and I effectively then retained Cash Converters and continued with Cash Converters. Peter and I were chatting one day and saying, well, if the business model is as valid in South Africa or Southern Africa, it should possibly be as valid into the rest of Africa. So we have sourced the master license for Sub-Saharan Africa, and we're planning to open the first store in Lagos in Nigeria in the next couple of months. So yes, the vision for Cash Converters in Africa is effectively to open Cash Converters in every country in Africa and provide financial inclusion to the consumer base in those countries.
Richard and I have worked together in business since 1994. It's been an incredible partnership. It has really worked extremely well, and often people say to us, how did this come about? And I think it's really because we have complementary skills. We don't mess in one another's space. We work well together. We think along similar lines. We have fundamentally the same value systems. We both came from environments where our parents, our fathers were involved in business. So we grew up with entrepreneurship as part of our daily being. Common value, the common understanding. And as time grew by with us being in business, we were really able to always think on the same line. We always come to the same conclusion. We always work together and we work through the problems. And it has been an incredible partnership that has stood the test of time.
Peter and my skill sets are dramatically different. I'm more on the operational side of things. He's more on the business modeling side. And so we know that we have that piece of the puzzle resolved because he looks after that. I look after the operations. And together we effectively are able to build a business that has all the pieces in the puzzle in place in order to ensure that it is sustainable and profitable over the long term. But from my perspective, a partnership is really important if you're going to want to build anything of scale and anything of value that's sustainable into the long term. And the reason for that is that you simply don't have all the skills necessary to run a business. No one individual does. And so what we try to do is we structure the partnership along a philosophical departure point of looking for people that we bring into our organization that have common values. So as an example, within the Cash Converter business, the values of passion, professionalism, integrity, respect and collaboration are really, really important to us.
We brought to the market a concept that made sense. It formalized it, it gave the brand credibility, it gave it high street presence. The franchising model worked perfectly with the Cash Converters concept. It brought disciplines, financial disciplines, it brought marketing disciplines, it brought all the daily operational procedures to formalizing the business. Both of us have a passion and a love for franchising, and I think that has driven the business from day one. Our core competency, our skill, has always been in the concept of franchising.